Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm excited to have you back here on the podcast, episode 108 with Kevin Wilhelm. And he is the president and CEO of the Middlesex United Way. And he's also has served on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce and is very involved with the community. He's also been awarded the N double, wait, how do you pronounce it?
NAACP.
NAACP, and has spoken at graduations at the local college, and yeah, has helped manage a lot of volunteers, a lot of staff, and has contributed a lot to the community. But I'm really excited to have you on the podcast, Kevin.
Me too, Davidson. This is my first podcast. This is exciting for me.
Yeah.
Let's hope it's not your last because it's my first. Let's hope it goes really well and that we inform and entertain. That is the goal, correct?
Yes, yes. I think this will be fun. You've been definitely like one of the most engaged authors in our newest project, Redefining Masculinity. And it's great just chatting with you and your energy, and you're also an Eagles fan. So hell yeah to
Yes.
that.
Should we just divert to that?
If all
Or is
else
that,
fails, let's talk about the Eagles.
or maybe that will be 109, or maybe 129 will be your
We should. Oh my
episode.
God, that's a good idea. We should do something about
We'll
the
do that.
Eagles. I feel like there's a lot to talk about.
All right. And I do remember you promised to buy me tickets so when we go to the game this weekend. I thought I heard that promise from you.
How about this? If you get 1,000 views on this episode, I'll buy your tickets.
Fine. Deal.
But if you get less than 1,000, you buy my tickets.
Sure.
That's funny.
My word is my bond.
Well, thanks for being on here. I'm really excited to chat with you. I think the book, like you've been saying, like has been getting a lot of feedback, a lot more feedback than my first book for sure, with The Great Pause. I think because this topic is just so there's not a lot of people talking about what we're talking about, right? So I think it's just like a timely message. And I know we were catching up earlier a bit about your history and your love life and sort of like how you met your
Whoa.
wife. Um, so I feel like there's a lot to talk about. What would you say is like something that you've got out of being an author that you didn't expect?
Yeah, it's not something that has been a goal of mine. I've always enjoyed writing, and I think, I've actually had a column in our local paper in the Middletown Press for really more than a decade, kind of talking about work-related projects and whatnot. But it's and I've always enjoyed writing, but I never thought of necessarily publishing as something um, that I would really aspire to. But it's been an awesome experience, and can I tell you how I even got involved in the project? It's kind of an interesting story.
Yeah,
Can we go
sure.
there?
Mhm.
So the publisher, Greenheart Publishing, Liz Hill, was, I don't usually see her much on Facebook, but I did notice a post when she was asking for feedback about the cover for this, book, and then the
Oh,
topic,
yeah.
redefining masculinity, right? And so,
Yeah.
and I saw the 5 cover options, which were well done, right? But
Hmm.
I had a very strong instant reaction to all of them, and to
Hmm.
me they spoke of, in part, what's wrong with how men are portrayed.
Hmm.
In the cover options, men were either alone,
Hmm.
and none of them really did you see their face.
Hmm.
So if we're trying to, you and I, we'll discover, I think, a theme in this book is strength and vulnerability, which means that
Hmm.
you have to be known and seen and heard, right? So,
Yeah.
and be able to connect with other people, other guys, right? So we're not
Hmm.
alone, and we're not hiding. So anyway, I was
Yeah.
going back and forth, and she finally said, Lisa, this is great, would you like to talk about contributing a chapter? And I said, yes, let's do it.
Hmm.
So here I am.
Huh. That's so cool, and that's fortuitous, right? Like, I know it really stuck to me that like how much you really care about the men in your life and your friends and your
Mm,
relationships. Like, it really stands out to me that how much you care about. I know you mentioned that there are some relationships in your life and some unfortunate news, and just the way that the care and the love that you have for your friends, like it's very apparent. And I think many men wish to have someone that cares that much about them, right? I don't think it's common to have men really openly share like, hey man, like this is how much you mean to me, but it seems like you do that regularly with the men in your life.
I do now. So as part of my story, there were decades where that really wasn't the case, and so that's part of the reason why I just am so grateful and appreciate where I am now in life.
Mm,
As we read through the story, it's really clear that um, uh, that I'd always aspired to have that depth, Davidson, and to have those
mm,
meaningful connections. But for lots of reasons, my own responsibility, I didn't really pursue them, and now I am really comfortable with that, and it is incredibly meaningful. And part of it, I if you don't mind, we talk about briefly mentorship.
mm,
People sort of ask and suggest, use that phrase with me a lot, and that's fine. That's not really, I don't ever really seek to do that, but to me, my perspective is very clear that um, through getting to know people, getting to know other guys, and informally, and then as that develops, we're always learning from each other. And so it's really a give and take at all times.
mm,
Sometimes there might be someone in such a desperate situation that we are giving and they are completely taking because that's what they need. But
mm,
that's not the norm. So even
mm,
if it's, whether it's age or like a work related thing, we're kind of feeding into each other.
mm,
So the mentorship to me is always mutual. So I just feel like
mm,
um it's always positive for both people. I don't like the whole
mm,
thing about, it's just the ratio of give and take that changes over
mm,
depending upon circumstances and situations, or need of the person. Does
mm.
that make sense?
Yeah,
So
I
sort
think
of.
it's interesting because it's funny, right? Because I think the more we give, the more fulfilled and the happier we are, right? It's like almost
Yes.
the opposite of what you would think, right? It's like, oh, but if I'm giving all the time, wouldn't that make me have less? But it's actually giving is more in a way, right? It's like almost weird how like if you look at it mathematically, it doesn't make any sense. But if you take along like the analysis, like analyzing anyone like in your shoes who's given so much, like you can die honestly like a happy man because like, hey, at the end of the day, I know that I've have made a lot of impact in the world. Whereas like, maybe people have a lot of money, but maybe they might, or maybe they weren't there for their family, or maybe they've haven't they stopped speaking to some of their friends, like like maybe they have a high net worth, but maybe they
Mm.
haven't felt as fulfilled, right? So it's interesting how that works.
I actually, it I actually it this I'm a person of faith, right? That's part of my story,
Mm,
right? So um this it doesn't make any sense unless you are a person of faith, but I truly believe that all the relationships that matter to me the most have been strengthened, even in the past decade, where my connections, my strong connections to other men, there are so many. So the more connections I have, the more time I believe I have for everyone. It's fascinating
mm,
because I'm getting a lot. And I actually feel like the focus and attention and who I am around my family,
mm,
because I'm learning and growing, and I think,
mm,
and serving others, and being served in return, but serving others, it's actually served me well with the people that I'm the closest to. So they've all been
mm.
strengthened. That is incredibly powerful to
Yeah.
have that, to have a bunch of people that I connect with that I didn't used to, and spend a lot of time in investing in each other, and that serves me really well at home and with other people that I'm close to. That's just awesome. And it's not in the book, but
Yeah.
that's actually what happened to me.
Hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? Because it's like you would think it's the opposite, right? You would think like,
Totally
oh,
think it's the opposite.
it's
But
like,
but but
huh.
you referenced it kind of. There's sort of joy, and and you're when we are giving or serving, we are getting something in return, like heart related,
Mhm,
and so it is positive. And I'm at a stage in life where I'm able to do that. Like it's time wise and whatnot.
mm,
when my kids were little, that's not something that I would have been able to do. My life
yeah.
was the circle of people I was involved with were really related to my kids, right? So now I have as they're older, I have a chance to sort of form adult relationships with people, and my kids are, not we're just not as hands-on.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting because I often hear like as they become adults, it's a new dimension, right? Of like it's a different way of relating to them. Like it's more like a friendship, right? Instead of like, oh, they only come to me when they need something.
Right, 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 right. Yes, yeah.
But I'm sure
Yes.
there's still times where they
They're
still come
still
to you when they need something.
exactly. Yeah, but yeah, so I appreciate the stage of life I'm in, and I appreciate where I am right now, and I definitely appreciate the people in my life, and so that's kind of that. It's this is the perfect topic at the perfect time for me. This redefining masculinity, and it really drew me in. I don't know that I would have necessarily responded so eagerly to other topics, but this is clearly calling to me, and I felt like I had a story to tell, and I'm honored to share it. And the feedback has really been positive, and it's 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 very affirming.
Yeah, and would you be willing to share with us like a passage or a part that you would want to share with everyone? Because I do think it's such a cool feeling to be able to read something, on the Kindle, and then eventually when we get the physical book, I think it's just a beautiful feeling to, and then your community and all your loved ones can also enjoy and celebrate you as well, right? But yeah, if you want to share a passage, we'd love to discuss with you what it meant to you afterwards.
Do you mind if we start right at the beginning? Because it does set the
Yeah,
stage. Is that all
let's
right?
do it.
So,
Yeah.
so the title of my chapter is the heart, and it was very obvious that that's what it should be. And let me just start, and I think it'll start to reveal as I read why that is so critical, why that title is so natural.
Mm,
So it's all about the heart, said my friend and spiritual mentor Pete, yet again as we were finishing up lunch. I nodded my head silently, thinking to myself, yeah, yeah, as I usually did when we wrapped up another of our many lengthy chats about life, faith, marriage, fatherhood, and more. Pete knew that I lived mostly in my head rather than from my heart. I was not very comfortable expressing my feelings or emotions. I think I feared that if I expressed feelings or emotions, that would only reinforce the negative self-image I already had of myself as weak. I surely didn't want to appear even weaker to others than I thought I was. My mind was my comfort zone. Although I had always been friendly and connected fairly easily with most people, my connections were pretty much on a shallow level most of the time. I often overthought conversations, like pretty much all the time, and or my actions. I was overthinking them. Sometimes I would even have entire conversations with people in my own head.
mm,
My heart, though, always craved deep relationships. I wanted to be like Pete, who seemed to effortlessly cultivate them just by being himself. I always enjoyed my time with Pete. He's a youth pastor who was introduced to me in 2010 when I was approaching my 50th birthday. A mutual friend suggested Pete could be engaged as an ally in the work of the nonprofit that I lead. The more I spent time with Pete, the more I wanted to spend time with him. He had joy,
mm,
contentment, strong relationships, and deep faith. I wanted all of these, but was starting from scratch with none of these. Pete
mm,
worked out. He built things with his hands. He loved the outdoors. He could be competitive and aggressive. He was a man's man. He loved people deeply as his faith taught him to do. He frequently emphasized his faith, but I kept kind of dismissing faith as the driver of his joy, contentment, and secure relationships. Pete was a hugger, and he shed tears when he became emotional. He talked openly about his struggles. He was strong and vulnerable. I'll never forget the time he started talking about his love for his wife. He had to
mm,
continuously pause as he teared up. The mere thought of who she was and how much joy she brought to him and his family made him start to gently weep, and in public, no less. I was reminded of the shortest verse in the Bible: Jesus wept.
mm. Yes, that's beautiful, right? Like especially like what you said about his wife and how if we actually truly don't take our wives for granted in our partnership, it's like a beautiful thing, like unconditional love, right? It's like how many like even for me, like I definitely think I take it for granted sometimes, like
Absolutely. I am working actively on not taking the people I'm closest to for granted,
yeah.
and to be more present. Sometimes it's just easier the people that you're around the most, right? We do tend to take them for granted and are not as present as we are with other people. But
Mm.
just I distinctly remember where we were, what he was talking about, and the number of times he paused because the tears were running down about
Wow.
how devoted he was, and he was able to articulate just how amazing she was and how amazing she made him feel. Like, man, how
Yeah.
about that? How do I get some of that?
So yeah, I guess like spinning it back to you, like what are some things that you love about your partner? Like what would you say? And you don't have to cry or anything in front of it, but but if you were to like step into, your heart and just
Yeah.
speak honestly.
The things that, first of all, the stories in the book, but I will say that I was always attracted to redheads, and the short version is I pointed from across a crowded room, and I said I want to meet that redhead over there, and you have to read the book, and I did, and we got married shortly after that. So
Mhm.
that's interesting. But I actually um she was the first person that I was able to share some very personal things with that I didn't ever share with others. In fact, you know how you have that conversation where, hey, we need to talk. So I remember my wife's name is Lori, and so it was about 2 months into the relationship, and I wanted to let her know. She didn't know this, so she was very nervous and anxious. And this talk thing, she thought I was going to break up with her, but I really had a
Oh,
financial issue, and I just wanted her to know that I had a significant financial issue. And I thought, because in my mind, this is moving along, we got to
mm.
reveal some stuff. And I actually had some other things that I wanted to talk to her about. She was so relieved. She goes, "That's it." She goes, "I just thought you were going to break up with me. Everybody has this two
Aw.
month thing." It's like, anyway, but that was I was able to talk to her about two things that mattered to me very personally. And her response was trusting and loving and caring. So that was really important. But the thing is, we like all couples and family situations, the thing that I try to hold on to the most is not all the little things that get in our way where people have disagreements or whatnot, and is that there were three occasions that were really traumatic for our family since we've been married. And on all three of those occasions, we were together on the same page, and we stepped up big time to support each other and to make decisions together, sometimes that even didn't make sense to others. And we were just so I always had to go back to, sometimes life is a grind. We've got three kids, and they're all because of COVID, they're all living here again, which is going pretty well. But it's like, forget all those little day-to-day things that too many of us start to focus on and think is the big part of life, when
Mm.
really, when when life is really challenging, we're there for each other in big ways. And so and we actually try to we try to let our kids know that, because I remember distinctly them. They my wife she's very, very wise. She's really wise with advice. My kids, like, they saw us, we were bickering about something, and they kind of expressed frustration. And then my wife immediately said, what you don't see is what happens as we resolve it privately ourselves, a short time later. So you're seeing the public, yeah, we're ourselves. We're in the living room, we're in the kitchen, the dining room, whatever, things are happening. And then she's like, no, what you don't see is behind closed doors, how we resolve it. And that's
Mm.
like really important. Those kinds of, so there are building blocks, foundational things that I really value. And I try to focus and remember those, and
Mm.
not get caught up in the little things that bug me, or that bug us about each other. It's easy
Yeah.
to get caught up in like what annoys you. I mean, if you were to live with
Oh
anybody
yeah.
for 24/7 for years, there are going to be some challenging times.
Oh yeah. Yeah. With anyone for that amount of
Right,
time.
right.
Yeah.
So um, I think how we respond to the big moments, the most important moments, it really says a lot about
Mm.
who my wife is and who
Mm.
we are together.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me like with my wife, like she's definitely been there when I was like lost and depressed and going to therapy and like didn't know, like I was job switching every 6 months, like I didn't know what I was doing,
E and
right?
I hopping.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like she's definitely been there when I was just clueless. I was like, I don't know like, what I want to do. I don't know my purpose in life. Like I guess like a quarter life crisis, I would say. And I'll always remember that
Quarter
because
life crisis.
yeah,
You know,
I
that sounds like the title of a book. Can I get credit for that?
would you contribute like your quarter life crisis to
I'd
it?
have to remember like what it was in that to be in that generation. But anyway, yes, I'll contribute.
But so I like I randomly moved to Connecticut and Trumbull, Connecticut out of nowhere, like from Jersey. Like I was just going through like a lot. And she was patient enough with me to like take the train all the way up to Connecticut all the time and like every weekend. And like I'll never forget that because like you said, like yeah, especially spending COVID together for the last, 24/7, like working from home, right? You kind of get on each other's nerves sometimes, but I'll never forget like the times where, I was like, let's just say like doing some shady things with like drugs and like I was not in a good place, right? And she stuck with me. She stuck with me when I was like getting fired from jobs. I was like
Mm.
getting let go left and right, and I was like not financially respond like was not doing well with my finances, right? And I was like moving from place to place and having new roommates, and my roommate was like not the most in the best place mind frame too, right? So it was just, but I'm grateful for that because I know that like, hey, if we ever had a bad patch again, like she'll stick with me.
That loyalty, you know, and I don't know how personal I'm going to get, but I do remember intentionally, and I don't do this a lot, so, but um, my wife has had some on and off very significant chronic pain, right? And she was really pretty down about it. It's good, getting a little better, but I, I remember twice I was moved when she was in bed and just not feeling well, and I forget the exact words, but I went in there one time. I woke her up and I just like kind of grabbed her hand and I said something to the effect like, "I just want you to know I'm never going anywhere. Like we are in this because you know." You think about the vows and sickness and in health, but sometimes sickness or illness or like it could become your whole life, right? So that is not what we envision when you're standing up there
Mm-hmm.
joyously reciting vows and everyone's happy and you're drinking and people are cheering you and whatnot. Is that you fast forward you know decades down the road, your life is probably not maybe what you thought it was going to be, and one or the other may be truly either incapacitated or just really struggling in a very significant way. And I just want to really affirm that I am in this no matter what, even if you are really, I didn't like in my mind, like I'm thinking, if you're unable to get out of bed, whatever it is
Yeah.
that might happen. So, again, I don't do that a lot, but I do think, again, though that kind of affirmation is really important.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I definitely think the times that we felt the most connected was like you said when she was like sick with the flu or just has a migraine or like she just really can't get out of the bed and she was just so happy that I'm just sitting next to her, right? Whether it like for it's interesting because the times that I've felt the most connected with her is like when like I'm reading a book and she's just like falling asleep like right next to me or on my lap or whatever, right? Like for me, like those are the most beautiful moments, not the highs of the highs when I get promoted and stuff. Cause like,
Mm,
like that feels great, but just doing nothing and just being in each other's company, like for me is just beautiful, right? Cause it's like no one's expecting anything of me. Like I don't have to prove myself. Like I don't have to raise this amount of money to prove that
mm.
like I'm worthy of you know what I mean, of love and stuff like that, right? So it's that unconditional love is when I feel like the most connected, honestly.
That's right. That's awesome. That makes sense to me, and and I'm glad to hear that. That's what your relationship is like. We are that whole sort of financial aspect where you're always making a bunch of little deposits with each other, right? And then eventually someone needs to withdraw a lot, but but there's so much there, and there's so much trust and grace and love that then when that withdrawal needs to happen, you're still partners, you're still together. So you got
Yeah.
to make all those little deposits, and all of a sudden you're really rich in the
Mm.
strength of your relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
have
like,
never said these things out loud. This is
yeah.
I love the fact you're making me in a really good, healthy, positive way think about those things or express things in a way that I haven't before. You're good. You
Yeah.
should do a podcast more often. You maybe should write some books, Davidson. Honestly, I would like in the credits or the acknowledgments to acknowledge this idea coming from me to you on February 23rd of 2021.
Yeah, and I love like what you said about like, we have all these mentors in life, and these men who model these behavior that affects you, right? Like clearly the other Pete in the book, he's been really inspiring for me because he's very honest about saying like, hey man, like whenever I meet someone new, whether it's an 18-year-old or 16-year-old man, he's like, I'm always thinking in the back of my head, like, is he gonna like me? Is he gonna accept me? Is he gonna think I'm cool? Like, am I hip enough with, and he's very honest with it. He's like, I've been leading men's workshops for years and years. And every year, I mean, every new workshop, I'm still afraid, like, am I gonna be accepted? Like, am I manly enough for this guy? Like, is he gonna like my beard? Like all these little things. And he's like, I've been doing this work for what seems like a lot every day, right? And I'm still questioning, like, am I cool enough to hang out with these guys, right? And it's just something that is we all go through as men.
Well, a big part of my story, which was an easier part to write because um, I was really in this comparison trap for a long time, and there's reasons for that. I have a twin brother, but there's other things
Mhm.
that I was I really was into this hard, and so I always felt like I was on the short end of the stick, and that was completely my own, mental attitude about it, right? But this is literally this. I don't. This is not in the book either, but literally one day on the phone. Um, uh, Pete, my friend Pete, who I read about, he temporarily worked for United for me for 6 months, and we were really it was actually pretty awesome to be in the same office working together every day. But at one point, I had to call him on the phone, and as I was picking up the phone to call him, literally, I heard a voice saying, stop comparing yourself to Peter or anyone else, and stop being jealous and
Wow.
envious. And I was instantly, and I haven't been since. This was like 8 or 9
Wow.
years ago. So when he answered the phone, I told him that, and he was like, he was so excited, so relieved, I think a little tearful, because he could
Wow.
see that what I had done, because I really do admire him very much. I did put
Mhm.
him on a pedestal, and I thought that um, I needed to be like him, when really I need to find
Mhm.
the best version of myself.
Mhm.
And I have my own God-given talents and abilities and purpose. And not to compare to other people. That has been beyond freeing. And it's
Mhm.
it's a huge part of my life. And I really try to help others understand that trap, how limiting it can be. And so
Yeah.
that was just in an instant. And again, if you're a person of faith, you might understand that or might have experienced something similar, but that's been
Mhm.
so powerful. I actually
Wow.
now celebrate other people's successes instead of looking at
Mhm.
them or trying to downplay them, or not acknowledge them, or just fake and acknowledge them, or just in my mind compare
Mhm.
myself. And it's just freeing, Davidson. It's just huge.
I, I think that's a great point. I think once you acknowledge, you can celebrate other people's success. Like when you were sharing with me, like how you had so much feedback and so many of your friends have read it and have given you positive praise. I think me 5 years ago would have been like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Like, how come he has so much love? Like, oh man, like, more like that scarcity context. But I was
Yeah,
genuinely just happy for you, right? And I was just like, wow, like I was
appreciate
able
that.
to contribute, to this, right? And I think it's such a big shift, right? When we stop um thinking like, oh man, why does that other person have so much more than me? Instead, just being like, wow, like that's amazing. Like, and then just being happy for the person, right? I think that it takes a big person to generally be happy. And we're not perfect. Like
Right.
there's definitely some days where I'm like, man, I should have got that promotion over
Mm.
as, her or him. But then once we stop and acknowledge, like, you know what, like I'm pretty happy where I am in life, and I'm just fortunate to be alive, to be breathing, to have a a wife who loves me, and start to think about like what I should be grateful for instead of like, oh, I don't have XYZ. It's like it's such a simple practice, but it has really served us well in life, it sounds like.
I think so. And even just, writing in the book, Davidson, the chapter, and I'm really grateful that you put this all together, you and Liz, is that, that's like, that should be enough. And so this is the way I look at it. And it really was. The writing process for me kind of went as I expected. And parts of it were easy, parts of it were challenging, but I really was very pleased, and I got over my anxiety about putting the story out there in public, which I knew I would, but I still had to go through that. But in the end, just the writing of it, even if I got zero feedback,
Mm,
is enough for me. And anything
mm,
else that people would choose to share with me is bonus.
mm,
And that's how I look at it. So, and I have been fortunate that people have, given me some positive feedback, and have been interested in reading it and learning more. And
mm,
but it is, I learn a difference. There's what I need and what I right. There's a difference between like need and want,
mm.
right? So I don't I don't really need the no, actually, this is a bad example. I'm lost my train of thought. I didn't. Hmm. Oh, preferences and need. So it's my preference that people are able to express constructively, positively, or with concerns about whatever, and that's my preference. But I
Mm,
don't need any of it,
mm.
right? So it's not so
Yeah.
yes, it doesn't change the value of the words
Mm.
that I wrote or how I
Yeah.
felt about it.
It,
Um,
it's awesome, right? It's sort of like, I also do like a lot of fundraising for like the Orphans Future Alliance and some other projects that I'm involved with, right? And of
Thank
course
you.
I would
That's really
want,
awesome. Thank you. On
yeah, and I
behalf of
feel
those
like,
I appreciate that. I'm glad it's not easy to do fundraising. So
oh yeah,
thank you.
I'm sure So it's like of course I would want like more or people to donate to my, building schools in Africa and stuff like that, right?
Mm,
Like that's great. So I was very happy that it's like, okay, I raised like enough to be able to go there, right? And of course I would want double that, right? So I can support my team
mm,
and everyone else involved, so I can get more people to help us as we go. But then I know like at the end of the day, like, okay, I'm a good person, like I'm doing the best I can, and it doesn't necessarily matter how much I raise. Like I think that's great, but if I'm like strong in my conviction and like, hey, this is a good cause, like I'm doing good work, everything else will take care of itself, right? So I don't necessarily like need the, oh well, I want to raise the most out of everyone out of the
mm,
team, right? And then for me, like that's been freeing because I think in the beginning it was like, well, I need to like I have to because if I don't, like I'm a failure, or in the beginning I was like, I need to make up for all the wrongs I've made or all the sins I've committed, right?
mm,
So it was coming from a place of like, oh, well, if I do this, like I'm a good person versus like now where I'm like, well, I know I'm a good person, but it's a choice. Like I think doing this would be nice. Like it'd be cool to build 5 schools versus 2 schools. So I think like it's shifted recently, but it wasn't always like that, right? Like in the beginning, it was like making up for lost time. Like I'm like, oh man, like in my night when I was 20, when in my 20s, like I was a bad person. So I need to raise a lot
mm.
of money to make up for that.
Right. Doesn't quite work that way. But
Right.
sometimes though, sometimes the effort you put in, let's say it's the fundraising, maybe you get a person or two involved and you don't even realize that maybe for a decade they pick up and get enthusiastic and they start supporting that organization in ways you might not even know, that are sort of in society's measures are more significant. Maybe they're able to also, maybe you get credit for pulling them into a project you care about and they help build 2 more schools. So it's
Mm,
like, what is the impact? And you don't, sometimes you know it and see it and sometimes you don't. And but you have your role to play, and you do what you can. And the key
yeah.
is, Like what drives it? What is your why? Why are you
Mm,
doing this? And
yeah.
if it's a pure motive about caring for other people and using your heart, um,
Mm,
then it's all good. And
yeah.
the success that you achieve is, you have to just look at very positively, and not look at the measures that other, you might have a friend who literally, uh, has worked for several companies in a C-suite high level person, and can call the corporate relations people and get, three $100,000 donations, that like, so
Mm,
that, but you brought him or her in, like, that
mm,
kind of thing.
mm. Yeah, I think we don't often think about like the impact that we have on a much larger scale. I think we think more of like in just the direct impact, right? But for like you
Right.
said, sometimes I don't think about like, oh, I've helped, I've probably helped over 100 people get jobs at different companies.
That's cool.
And
Wow.
but I don't often think about like, okay, well, what's the impact that they have had in these
That's
organizations,
so
right?
important, right? What's the
Yeah.
impact of that? And you may or may not ever know it. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes in this hard driving world, and I know that, I think, are you a coach as well? Or you're a
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes people, it's another kind of trap. I don't have a name for it, but, we don't ever want to aim too small. But I think sometimes we
Mm,
aim big, and we think that global impact or major, obviously identified public impact is what real success is. It literally could be that you interact with one person who is a completely different person because of interaction, and that sets upon generations of change. And
mm,
and it's all the same value to me. And so if you are a person who has the potential to make dramatic, you know global or regional or significant change that touches
mm,
lots of people, go ahead. But that's not, like, if you're not able to do that, or that, but don't discount or devalue
mm,
what you are able to do. And maybe it's even just in your own family, what decisions you make or how you treat people or whatever. The whole thing
yeah.
about breaking the cycle of abuse, all of a
Mm,
sudden affects all of your generations behind you. So, like, and
yeah.
that could be, I think that's a win. That's good enough. Like, you may
Yeah.
not, start, you may not end hunger in
Mm,
Somalia, but if you
yeah.
all affect positively all those future generations because you've stopped the cycle of abuse, that's a huge
Yeah.
win.
Yeah, I mean, not all of us could be CEOs of United Ways, right? Like, I mean, that's like next level stuff, right? I think it starts with, like you said, like just being one of your 800 volunteers that you helped impact it is sometimes good enough, you know?
Well, it's yeah, definitely, it's been fun, and I get inspired every day by both the people that I work with on staff, the volunteers we work with, and the people that are served. So it's super awesome. So I definitely, there's a lot of joy there, and but I'm enjoying it even more now because of the perspective change that I've had and the growth that I've had to go through, and I'm really grateful for what other people speak into my life. And so it's always a two-way street. I think I'm always learning. I sometimes connect with, some kids at church who were younger, under 20, or maybe in their early 20s, and I'm in a conversation with them or whatnot. There's always something I can learn. Like, it's not just
Mm,
me pouring into them, and they may not
mm.
be intentionally pouring into me, but I can learn from them, or, develop, and grow in a way that, I might not otherwise have. That's super important.
Yeah, that's a great mentality because, I think sometimes people think wisdom is when, older, right? Like the elders, which I think most of the time it is, right?
I think that should be right. Right. We should be getting wiser as we go older. That would be natural. But it
Right.
doesn't mean there's no wisdom that a 20-year-old has, that they have
Right, right.
zero.
But like, all of us are at different like I'm sure there's some 20, like I have a mentee in one of the Bronx high schools that I meant it's a 4-year mentorship
Mm,
I'm a part of, and I learned so much from him
yes.
in terms of just creativity and just speaking his mind, and just like he creates rap and beats, and like anything I say, like he'll do it. I'm like, oh yeah, you should check out graphic design or whatever. And then like I come back and he's creating album art like the next week. And I'm like,
That's
and you know what I mean? Like for us, it's like a big, it's like for us to do that, it's like a big change, right? For him, like I could be like, yeah, you should look into this video editing software. And then the next time I speak to him, he's like already created 5 videos. And I'm like, Jesus, it's like we can always learn from others. I think sometimes the youth have that like boldness that we don't have because like, we've had a lot of failures in maybe like these certain areas. And then for them, it's like they haven't experienced in that yet. For them, like they're much more bold and they're just like, he just releases content and songs like all the time, and I'm just blown away. I'm just like, wow, like to me, to be able to release a song would take like a month.
Well, we do have to, I think, hopefully approach other people as, everybody has value, and so if we focus more on the strengths that people have rather than their weaknesses or flaws, and regardless of the developmental stage they're in, that's very, very positive and empowering. Maybe, and I'm kind of naive that way. I see the best in people. Part of that is just me, my nature. Part of that's strengthened by my faith. But like, I really believe in that. Like, let's look for the good in each other. You can't ignore the bad stuff that is hurtful to you or others. Like, you can't ignore that. But there's a lot of little stuff that isn't necessarily very significant that might be negative or concern. But why not focus on building up the strengths? I believe in you build up your strengths, and you only worry about your flaws unless they're really hurting you or someone else. You just don't
I
worry
love
about them as
that.
much.
Yeah, that's a really good
Am I coaching you? Can I send you a bill?
You can. I don't know about I'll necessarily pay it on time. um, well, thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate our conversation. I want to acknowledge you for obviously the meaningful impact and the work that you're doing in the world, like just giving back to the communities. And I wouldn't be surprised if you continue to write a lot more. It seems like it's something that really drives you, and I'm sure there's a lot of other topics that you would want to share with the world. But yeah, thanks for being on the podcast, and thanks for contributing to redefining masculinity. Like obviously not do the book only, but do your actions, your being, your support, your optimism, and just your vision for the world.
Well, you're welcome. This was really fun, and I'm appreciating getting to know you. And just you are an authentic, vulnerable person, and I continue to need role models. I need that to be modeled consistently with me too. So and I think that comes. I don't know if it comes natural to you, but it's something that you've learned behavior that you share and impart with others, including me. So I'm grateful.
Thanks, Kevin. That means a lot
You're
to me.
welcome.
Yeah, the feeling's mutual. Like when you shared about your friend and how that's affecting you, like it's hard for men to acknowledge that, like that we're suffering. Like men are supposed to be this. I think yes, like there's a time where we need to be strong and be that staple and that character where everything's going to be okay despite the setbacks, right? But there's also a side of the new masculinity which you're modeling, that's like, hey, I can generally communicate with my friends like, hey, you mean a lot to me, and I'm really sad that you're not at 100%, and I'm here for you, and no matter what, like I'll be there for you, even though it is challenging to be with you at this time, but that I'm here no matter what happens, right? That's rare, I feel like.
And I think you and I can, and those that also wrote chapters and contributed, and people who are reading it, and I love the fact that women are reading it. If we can all learn that lesson, right? We can all be more open and vulnerable and trusting and supportive of each other when we need. So that's part of the point of writing the book, right? So and reading it, and I think you and we do encourage some of the um, more interesting and positive reaction I've gotten is from other women,
Mm,
which is cool. It's a book for
yeah.
all, a book for everyone. You get a book, and you get a book, and you get a book.
Oprah. Yeah, it's cool to open up this conversation, and it'd be cool to kind of reflect 5 years or 10 years in a line where someone reads it and be like, hey, because of your book, I was able to share a little bit more openly with my
Mm.
girlfriend or my wife, and that's the goal, right? To
Brother, dad, whatever, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
whoever.
yeah. Like, oh, as I was able to tell my dad that, like, hey, like,
Mm.
I was kind of sad when you went on that 2 week long business trip to
Mm.
overseas, right? Like, I definitely missed you. Like, it's tough for men to say stuff like that, right? And the dad, or even the dad saying like, "Hey son, like, I'm doing this for you. Like I'm the reason why I'm traveling so much is because I just want the best for you, and I don't want you to suffer or necessarily work as hard as I do now, right?" And men don't really say that too often, right?
No,
A
not
lot
too
of
much.
times it's like, through other
We're,
ways.
we're going to encourage that. We're going to keep encouraging that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much. And yeah, I'm sure this won't be the first time. I'm sure there'll be many more conversations and hopefully many other collaboration projects that we'll have in the future.
Good. I hope so.